Alright, so this is a really quick tutorial about mesh lights in Redshift. So I'm just gonna make a random type. For some reason this is grayed out and just unloaded the tool, so I just had to go into my plugin manager and like remake that. Which is super weird. So, rar Redshift. Alright, so now I have this super gorgeous text here. I would like to add a background, and nothing insanely fancy. 90. So I found that mesh lights in Arnold are a little bit just like easier, just physically easier to create. Sometimes for some reason I have issues in Redshift where it just like gets weird and I have to do some like convoluted stuff. I don't know if it's just like my computer or what, but so in Redshift, I see it's also uninstalled my Redshift setting. I see how it is. Just gonna load that. Also, please auto-load. Has it also gotten rid of Arnold? Like, what? Usually I have an Arnold tab up here, too. Arn. Okay, cool. But you can see either way, now I have a Redshift tab. I'm really curious really quick. Yeah, why is it got rid of my Arnold tab? What is happening right now? Anyway, later problems. So if I go to light, I'm going to create a physical light. So like in Arnold, they just had the option for Redshift, or I'm sorry, for just to make a mesh light. But here you have to go into physical light. I do not care, McAfee, at all. And then here, if you scroll down under area, instead of setting this to rectangle, you want to set it to mesh. You know, so it just makes this weird little bubble thing. And then if you select your mesh and then the light, you can just hit this link button here, and it should then link your lights. So I'm just gonna break out my Redshift render view real quick. Hit the play button, and I'm gonna 540. Because I'm on my laptop right now, which very much is not a huge fan of rendering things. And again, you'll see that this has like a giant awful Redshift watermark on it because I'm using the trial version for this. But anyway, so the first thing you'll notice is it does indeed make the light shape not quite as sexy as Arnold's by default, but it does a weird thing where it basically duplicates your light. So right now I have this type mesh and my physical light. And you'll notice, like, if I select that physical light, it is this little mesh light here, and then also basically just a copy of the text. So I'm just gonna go and hide this original mesh, and you can see that now the light appears significantly brighter, because it doesn't have like a mesh basically just intersecting with it. The other weird thing is, like, I can move this. So if I move that up here, I'll unhide my original text, and you can see that now I have this sort of very bright light up here moving independently of the text. So it's just like another weird sort of thing to be aware of with the Redshift lights. So anywho, I'm going to go in and I'm going to, holy crap, I just want my light settings. I'm just going to delete history on that. Type mesh. There we go. Physical light settings. Gotta scroll around a bit apparently. So I'm just gonna take the intensity multiplier down, maybe to something like 1. Let's see how that looks. Cool. Kind of digging that. So, and then I'll just like fiddle a little bit with the exposure because I have converted to using exposure because I just think it's easier. But anyway, and it's also closer to real world, like how cameras work. But make sure I'm actually recording this, because that would be awkward if I wasn't. Okay, cool. Sorry. Anyway, so you can see that I now have this here. If I decided that maybe I didn't want this mesh visible, I would just uncheck visible here. And this is actually, I guess, a little bit different from how Arnold works. So In Arnold, like, it would make this, this basically looks like it has like a mission or a light. It looks like it's glowing, as one might expect. In Arnold, it would be emitting light and then just be basically like a default Lambert material, so you'd have something that would look like this, basically. More or less, sort of, with a little more light being emitted. But basically what this is just the light that's not rendering the actual text, and then the original text there, but that looks terrible, so meh. Alright, I'll scroll back over, find my stupid light settings, and I'll just turn that back on. So if I did want to make this rainbowy, like I did in Arnold, I just go in, I'm just gonna chuck a ramp in here, because I loves me a good ramp, and I'm just gonna make this rainbowy, because rainbow is amazing and good, and everyone should like rainbows. Red, orange, yellow, I guess, would be a good thing to put in here. And maybe green, because that green doesn't show up well. Wow, that is fantastically trippy. But anywho, so you'll notice that, like, when I do this, it's not... Honestly, I really like the way it displays, but it's not going, across like I might want, so I'd hope it would be, like, red going all the way down to purple on this side instead of a sort of multicolor thing. That's just... It's based on the UVs of the object. So I'm just going to do a UV planar map on this, because I'm feeling honestly quite lazy, and I've chosen the wrong axis for this. So I'm just going to do planar map, and I'm just going to do x-axis. Still wrong axis. Honestly, it kind of gives me the effect I want, but ideally I would have z-axis. Cool. So what I want is basically like this stretched out. So if I go into my UV editor here, I always click planar map instead of UV editor. It drives me nuts. This feels like the bad, like Microsoft Word text. But anyway, so you can see, by setting up a planar map like this, I basically have a raw Redshift, so I can control each letter individually if I wanted to, and like set the color if I wanted to be like fiddly about it, which I don't. So right now I have red going to purple, and you can see that like the color of the light is changing, the color of this text itself is changing. And if I go into Hypershade, because I'm honestly too lazy to try to figure out where the heck I put that, I'm just going to break into my textures, and I'm looking for my browser. Here we go. So I have my ramp texture here. I'm just going to set this, instead of VRamp, so here's like the sample of it, so it's going from basically, if I have like raw Redshift kind of written out like regular text going across this way, it's going to start with red at the bottom, go to purple at the top. I'm just going to set this to URamp, and now it's going to start red at one side and go to purple at the other. You can see it's reflecting that here. So that's pretty much mesh lights in Redshift, honestly. It is nice in the sense that you don't need to, I guess, map in other textures. Oh, by the way, you can add noise to your ramps, and it's amazing. And you can, this is like pretty much, if you're ever trying to make like a Makume Gane effect, whatever, I have no idea how you pronounce that, but effect with like polymer clay or the Damascus steel, you can totally fudge that with ramp shaders. Anyway, that's my spiel. Quite fun. But yeah, so again, that's pretty much mesh lights in Arnold. You can set the samples to be higher, and you usually need to, because mesh lights usually end up being a wee bit noisier than regular lights. So like I might set this to like 30, which does feel maybe a little bit overly aggressive. But again, mesh lights do tend to be a little bit more noisy than standard lights. So you might need to bump the samples up more. I've actually had mesh lights where I had to put the sample to like 50 to get something regular, and it was awful and took forever to render, but that's usually why I'd recommend using them in like the background of your scene, not necessarily using a mesh light for like the main illumination, unless it was like the only option that you had, if that makes sense. But yeah, so again, that's pretty much mesh lights in the in Arnold, and by Arnold I actually mean Redshift. So I'm gonna set this back really quick to what it was before. And I just want to go over really quick, because I went over in class, just like if you wanted to switch the colors of these lights or something like that. So I have this, basically what I'm just going to do, I'm going to right click on selected color, and I'll set a keyframe at frame 1, I was gonna say, what the heck, I'll just go to frame 20. And then I'm gonna change this to blue. I don't really know, I'm just gonna sort of arbitrarily select colors for this stuff. Set key, what am I doing? Frame 20, and maybe I'll turn this red. Why not? I'll just swap them back and forth like a crazy person. Alright, so you can see that if I do that and I scrub between the frames, it's actually going to change. So it's like, this is red to blue and this is yellow to red. And as I scrub through, you can see that it's sort of changing those and rekeying them. And when I get to frame 20, it switched it so it's blue and red as I keyed it to. This is white just because that's apparently how the colors interpolate between blue and red. But yeah. So if you ever had to do like, you know, swizzly, crazy, weird lights or something, you could do it like this. And you can also, if you so choose, key the position of this. So if I set a key on selected position, and then maybe take this, I'll move it like, oh yeah, this was yellow at the beginning. I'll just key this here. So you can see that as I scrub through, it's actually going to shift that sort of yellow to red thing down my light. Possibly it would be interesting for like neon signs or something like that. I'm honestly not really sure. But you'll notice that it doesn't actually add. Maya apparently only adds keyframes sometimes down here to make them visible. Like if I keyed the translation rotation, it would totally add keyframes here. But in this case it doesn't. So if you ever need to see and get back to those frames later, just go to Windows, Animation Editors, and Graph Editor. And if you select this, okay, I might actually need to go into my Hypershade again and actually select my ramp. So I select that ramp. You can see here that it gives me the color list and like color entry 3. So you can go through and select like the red, green, and blue for all of those values, and modify, move them, set them around accordingly. I have the position here. So again, this is just like a graphical representation of basically how this is actually changing. So you can edit that here in the Graph Editor, which is again Windows, Rendering Editors, Windows, Animation Editors, and Graph Editor. I've been making rendering tutorials all morning. But yeah, so mesh lights are fun. I like them. Super fun for neon signs. And yeah, that's pretty much my spiel on mesh lights in Redshift.